to Horsefly Chronicles Radio with Julia and Philip Siracusa, sponsored by Carnation, airing live on the United Public Radio Network on 105.3 FM in New Orleans. This show's entrance has been edited, produced, and directed by Gwen Clapper from Perfect Trust Productions, LLC. You can find us at perfecttrustproductions.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monday night segment of Horsefly Chronicles Radio with myself, Julia Siracusa, and Phil Siracusa. We're broadcasting live from the International Public Radio and the United Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 FM from New Orleans. This evening's show is fully sponsored by Carnation, so we want to thank them for their sponsorship. You'll have to do a few things in order to participate. Go over to our YouTube channel, UFO Paranormal Radio, or International Public Radio. You can also go into all of the Facebook stations, UFO Paranormal Radio, UFO Undercover with Joe Montaldo, News on the Flip Side, Twitch, SoundCloud, and Podbean. Also go over to our group, Horsefly Chronicles Radio. Join if you haven't, and if you have any questions for our guest, please ask. Guys, we have...
So who's the guest tonight?
Okay, guys, we have an amazing guest, two amazing guests tonight. So please welcome Dr. David Bettenhausen and Carla Bogni-Kidd. Dave and Carla have been close friends since 1998, feeling a deeper spiritual kinship for each other. Dave and Carla had spontaneous memories of 29 past lives together while meditating. Dr. Dave was a registered nurse for 10 years before returning to medical school. He's now retired from his private practice. Carla recently retired as his office manager. They're both authors of multiple books together. You can find them on their website, thegiftofpastlives.com. So please let's welcome Dave and Carla to the show.
All right, so this should be brought up in a minute.
Yes.
All right, awesome. So reincarnation is a big thing. I mean, that's something that I believe in. How many people out there feel like they've been somewhere before?
Definitely.
Right?
I know I have.
Yeah. Reincarnation.
Let me see if I could. Here we go.
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
This is Dave. I hope this is okay. Carla is suddenly significantly under the weather, and she's definitely the prettier and more attractive of the pair. So I'm sorry about that for your listeners. She's also the sweet one, but you get me today, and we'll have no trouble filling in the hour. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, and we hope she feels better. But thank you so much for coming on tonight.
No problem.
So, take us to the beginning for both of you. How did this all start?
Well, it really started closer to almost 10 years ago. You know, the federal government and Medicare suddenly said we had to have electronic medical records in the office. And for your listeners that don't know that, it was a nightmare for doctors. We changed everything the way we had to practice. You know, now everybody's sort of used to doctors showing up with computers in the office and those kind of things. But for me, it was terrible. I usually got to the office about 5 a.m, was still doing notes at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, trying to get used to the transition, because most physicians either had to see 10 less patients to start with or work hours and hours outside of the normal hours we were working. So it was a nightmare, and I became incredibly grouchy. Carla, who has been my best friend for the last 25 years, came up and said, you know, you're just impossible to deal with. I don't know what to do with you. do you need to go to counseling? And then she said, maybe we want to try meditation. I said, I don't want to go to a counselor because, like most doctors, I didn't want to admit that I was crazy or losing it. So we started meditating in the office. Me and the other employees and Carla, we all meditated for a few days. The third or fourth day, nobody else came into the office but Carla and me. It was already better. It was so wonderful just to turn all the power off, all the electronic stuff off, and sit for 30 minutes before the patients came in. And I immediately felt better. On the third day I was meditating, we heard patients coming in. Carla and I jumped up, ran down the hall to try to start to see patients really quick. I got halfway down the hall and had to stop. And I ran back and I said, Carla, you're going to think that I'm absolutely lost my mind, but I think I was talking to your mother.
Wow.
And she says, what? I said, your mother. It reminded me of you. Her eyelashes were sort of the same. She was turned to the side. She was laughing and she kept showing me a shoe. Now, Carla's mother died 2 years before I ever bought this medical practice. I had never met her. Carla looked at me and said, a shoe? And she turned to the computer and brought up shoes. And 60 or 70 shoes jumped up on the screen. And I walked over and said, it's this one. Carla looked at me and said, my mother was a ballroom dancer, and that's the shoe she wore every day when she danced.
Huh, look at that.
Wow, that's crazy.
So I thought, this is a little strange. Carla wanted to go back and meditate, even though we had patients wandering in the door. She says, I want to go back. I want to try to reach my mother again. She had died of a brain tumor many years before. But we went ahead. We started seeing patients. At lunchtime, everybody runs into the break room. Everybody wants to meditate, see if they can find Carla's mother. And I know this is strange, but while I was meditating, I saw a little gray schnauzer. And the gray schnauzer had its head laying on a purple pillow with fringe around the corner. I said, Carla, I think this may be your dog, Musette. And Carla had put the dog down about a month and a half before this. I said, it looks like a little gray schnauzer. Now, they've had schnauzers for a long time, so they had another gray one named Riley, but I said, I don't know why. I think it's Musette. And I said, Musette is laying with a little purple pillow. And Carla started to cry. She said, right before we put her down, I embroidered a little purple pillow because she couldn't play with anything anymore. And I put the pillow in with her, and she slept with the pillow the last week of her life.
Oh, wow.
That is amazing.
So I'm like, okay, something is going on here with meditation. And so we kept meditating. We started to see things, and we had little visions of things that I didn't really understand. We saw lots of bright lights. We saw funny shaped temples. It was interesting. Carla brought up a temple in Chichen Itza, and it was the temple that I saw while I was meditating. And she had visited there once on vacation. So when I was trying to describe it, she knew what it was. Then I had this very vivid memory that I had never, that I at least didn't think I had ever remembered. And during that memory, I was a little boy and I got in a blue sedan in Nebraska. Now, I know that I was born in Nebraska, and as a 3-year-old, my father went to graduate school in Boston, and we drove across the country in this little blue sedan. I remember the same brick houses that were like married student housing when we got there. I knew my sister was just an infant. I remember getting lost going to these little the little brick housing units. But then suddenly I remembered running on a beach. And I was running on the beach in Boston, and I could see over in the side that there was Ferris wheels and a roller coaster, a whole bunch of souvenir shops, and I was screaming and yelling. And suddenly this little girl jumped up, yelled at me, said, "Be quiet, you're bothering my family." She jumped on me, pushed me down in the sand, looked at me laughing. Then she jumped up, put both hands on her hip, and she was wearing this little blue two-piece ruffled bathing suit. And I told Carla the memory, and she said, "Dave, it was me."
Oh my goodness.
She
Wow.
said, "I was raised in Boston. My parents were getting a divorce, but they were trying to get back together. They rented 2 cabs so they could take the 6 of us girls and my mother and father to go to Revere Beach. I always got hand-me-down clothes. We got to the beach, and I didn't have a bathing suit. And they bought me my first new clothes that I ever had, and it was a 2-piece blue ruffled bathing suit."
Wow. That is,
That's a mind blower right there.
I mean,
And so we knew something was going on, because that was 1962, and I bought the practice in 1998, and we had never seen each other since. So we kept meditating, and again, we were just kind of writing everything down and journaling in a book, anything we saw or heard or anything. And then there came a day, and I was suddenly meditating. I was standing in a dark alley. And I'm standing in the dark alley, and I look across the alley, and there's Carla. Now I say Carla. I know it's Carla. I could feel it was Carla. She had the same steel blue eyes, 40 years younger than she is now. But her hair was slicked back, and she had a little gold band on her head and was wearing a fringed skirt. She looked just like a flapper. And as I looked over at her, there was suddenly 2 bright flashing lights. I heard 2 bangs. I realized I was hit in the chest, and I was shot, and I was thrown back on the ground, and I knew I was dying and bleeding to death.
oh,
I tell Carla this story, and she looks at me like, "We should have got you a counselor. There's so many things going on here. We don't understand what's going on at all."
I mean, at this time, like, yeah, like what were the thoughts that were going through your head?
Well, I thought maybe I was crazy, but too many things were matched up. The very next day when I got to the office, I sat down, started to meditate. Carla came walking in, sat down, started to meditate with me. When I came out of meditation, I said, "Carla, I know part of the rest of the story from
Okay.
yesterday." I said, "It's like I went back to the day before that." And I was getting in a little car and driving to a wedding of a man named Angelo. And I arrived at Ashland Auditorium in Chicago. And I walked up the steps and sat down. And they were sitting people on the bride and groom side. And I knew Angelo had come to the bank that I worked at. And up front walked this little blonde dressed in a raspberry dress. And she started to sing the Ave Maria. And I was fascinated by her for 2 reasons. It was the same person I saw standing in the alley, and I knew it was Carla again. And I'm watching. And after the wedding ceremony of Angelo and his wife Lucille, I got up and went to the reception. And at the reception, I found her. She kept pushing me away, but finally agreed, because I was so annoying, to go to breakfast with me the next day. The next day, when I wake up, I get dressed and I go to Marino's. And at Marino's, I meet this woman. We take a walk along the Chicago coastline. And she tells me her name is Ruby Donaldson, and that she was born in Bullock, Georgia, and that she moved to Chicago to become a singer and a dressmaker.
Wow.
And then she worked for this man named Angelo Genna. So Carla comes in and I start to tell her. And Carla runs off and is suddenly missing from the office. And we're seeing patients and everything's happening. And suddenly she calls me from her home where she's sitting working on Ancestry.com.
Wow. I mean, I don't blame her. That's probably the first thing I would do too.
She calls me and she says, Dave, Ruby Donaldson was born in 1904 in Bullock, Georgia, to James and Anna Donaldson. Angelo Genna is the mobster in 1925 who gets married on January 10th, 1925. He's the mobster before Al Capone. I have a picture here of his wedding and the wedding cake. Did you know any of these things before? I said, I've never heard of any of those people. I don't know anything about mobsters. I knew who Al Capone was, but I didn't know who Angelo Genna was. She says, your memory is true.
Wow. This is an amazing story.
Yeah, so that started us on a journey. We started researching reincarnation. We kept writing everything down. In just a few more days, I met another woman while meditating. And I'll say woman. She told me her name was Isabella. And Isabella said, Dave, I have been with you for 6,000 years.
Wow.
Since your first incarnation. With Isabella's help and with continued meditation, we soon found 42 past lives for me and 34 for Carla.
Yeah.
And we found each other in 29 of them.
That's amazing. Now, in the 29 years, were you guys were together as husband and wife?
No, that's a great question. No, multiple times we were romantically involved.
Okay.
However, we met as children in one life, and she moved away. We met, well, actually, as children in two lives. In one life, she was about 15 or 16 years older than I was and would read to me in school. That was in South Dakota before it was really South Dakota, because that's in the 1700s. I found her as my mother and my sister also.
Wow.
But I found her frequently as a love interest. And while we were doing this meditation, there was another day and I was sharing another memory from that. And as I started to share the memory, I was really in the middle of a conversation between Jonathan Wright and Ruby Donaldson. And suddenly Carla was finishing my sentences.
Mm.
And we were having a conversation between Ruby and JJ. And we felt an immediate attraction, emotionally bonded. And we both had other significant others. And we felt very, very, very uncomfortable. And so we both jumped up and ran out of the room and went to see patients, because it was like, okay, this was emotionally a hot discussion. And so it is a very strange thing. Now, I'm going to say what's other things that are really interesting is that we found over time is we've found, because we know 42 for me and 34 for her, we found all sorts of interesting patterns, including that we found many other people from this life in our past lives, or people from two past lives, but not in this life, where we saw people that we again recognized. And the more research we did, we found out that, of course, we return in groups or soul groups of the same people over and over again. So there are many people in this life that I found in past lives,
Wow.
including Carla's mother. Isabella says that, has tried to give us some lessons that indeed we follow through with soul family, and we really come through in two ways. We either come through to help each other as like a family mate, or we come as a karmic mate, someone to test each other. And the goal of all of this is that someday everyone would be a family mate and there would be no karmic mates. So that we would continue to grow, and then everyone would love each other and we'd all be on the same side, which is interesting because when we saw the patterns in our past life, we had one specific spot where we were Viking, landing on Scottish soil and fighting the Scottish. In the next life, we were English, fighting the Scottish. In the next life, we were Scottish, fighting the English. And then Carla was of Viking descent and married into an English royal family and was fighting both the Scottish again. And Isabella said, well, it has to be that way because you'll have to fight on every side of every war so that you understand compassion, what the other side feels. So not only do you have to lose a war, you have to win a war. And then you have to realize that sometimes you lose and win the exact same war, because you fight on both sides. That's the only way you start to understand that in war, there really is no winner.
Isabella is your spirit guide.
Spirit guide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and Carla has a spirit guide also. We've discovered Elizabeth. So our first book was The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth, because we met all four during meditation. I'm going to just tell you this because as a doctor, it always fascinates me too. The other thing I found out is meditation is so incredibly healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not only reducing stress and those things, meditation lowers blood sugar, lowers blood pressure, lowers cortisol. And the first year I started to meditate, I'd always been heavy and I decided I was going to meditate. And at that same time, I'd injured a knee and I was trying to lose a little weight to take pressure off of it. So I set an intention that I was going to lose 2 pounds a week. And a year later, I was 104 pounds less.
Wow.
Nice.
So that was wonderful. It also increases dopamine and serotonin, which are the same medications we try to give you for depression.
Yep.
So it decreases depression, decreases anxiety. Meditation also opened me up to a spiritual experience that I didn't know was possible.
No, before this, were you a spiritual person at all?
I was raised Catholic. Carla was raised Catholic. That is really what I thought was the only way. Now I have since experienced this, and I've had Isabella talk to me, and I in no way want to discourage any Christian or any person from having their faith. But Isabella says reincarnation was always God's plan from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the perfect justice and perfect mercy. No loving parent would ever send you to hell for making one mistake or one sin. Isabella had me look up the word in Leviticus, which is so strange. The word in Leviticus for sin is the word kata. It was actually written originally in Aramaic, and the word kata means failed to reach your goal. Through translation, it became failure to hit the mark. And then when it got into English, it became the word sin or transgression. I love that when I think about it, because Isabella says it's just a matter of you didn't reach the goal that was set for you. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because reincarnation is really something that 33% of the world's population believes in. 20% of Christians say they do. It's been a tenet of Judaism. It's a tenet of Hinduism, Buddhism. Almost all indigenous populations have some reincarnation beliefs. Some of it's in an ancestor, a return of ancestor worship pattern. But as you look at all those things, you realize that it follows a pattern where God gives you chance after chance after chance to get it right. And what Isabella says is follow the 5 simple rules and you can get off the wheel someday. And the 5 simple rules are: live a life without conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness. And you do everything with and every choice and intention out of love. And you cannot create karma, and you cannot return, and you will return to God as the love in which you were created.
You know, Phil, you have a lot of, and you're really big in
Yeah,
reincarnation.
yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely a firm believer in reincarnation. I do have a couple of questions. You said
Sure.
God, so do you believe in heaven?
I believe in a spiritual realm, if you want to call it heaven. Usually my Catholic upbringing really just makes me say God. Sometimes if I'm giving a presentation or talking, I usually say God, Tao, creator, source, Brahman, because the term God is so described and masculinized that I don't think you can use just that term to talk about creator source that we're here from.
Okay. And do you think that we've chosen to come back in the physical realm through some type of contract with our souls in soul groups?
I love yes, I think we return in soul groups. Philip, I have a little issue with the idea of soul contracts. Isabella says there really is no such thing as a soul contract because you're given complete free will when you come here. And so no soul contract is enforceable. So the only choices that you can't really control is where you're born and who you're born to. The situations that you're drawn into have to be controlled in a different way. If you're talking about some of other religious doctrines, you'd say there's sort of the Calvinist approach, which you have predestination. So there's some things that you're going to face because you're going to be drawn into those situations. But you always have free will to make the choice on how you're going to react to it. So because you have a choice of how to react to it, you can get away without making more karma. Now, the idea of soul contracts is great. You have to still have someone who would enforce the soul contracts. So you would still need a deity of some sort. You would need someone, because there's 7 billion of us on the planet, and every single person would have to have complete their soul contract to how to interact with all 7 billion of us.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be coordinated in a way that I believe makes soul contracts unlikely.
Okay, good answer. So you had many of past lives, and are any of your family members also in these past lives?
Yes. So my current father, who passed away, has been in 6 of them that I've seen. There's a man named Tom who's been in 16 of them as my brother, my father, my friend, a couple times sort of an adversary. So, and Carla's been in 29 of them. I don't have anybody who's been in a life more than 29. And certainly, much like in this life, apparently it was almost impossible for Carla and I not to be drawn together. We met at 3 and then again at 38. And we're still best of friends and still involved with each other on a daily basis.
No.
So I think those things happen for a reason.
Oh,
Maybe
most definitely.
The both of you are married to other people, have significant others, correct? What do they think, and how are they?
Okay, so I will say that I am currently divorced, so
Okay.
that's a different issue. Carla's husband is very supportive.
Okay, great.
Right. Open to all of the discussions. In fact, since I work part-time as the vice president of medical affairs now, it gives me more free time. So Carla and I continue to write. So there are many evenings that I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to go somewhere with this conversation.
Sure.
We both believe in past lives. You've had many reincarnations. So you said your father passed away.
Correct.
Okay. Will you meet him in another lifetime, and will you know that was your father, or or can it only be done through forms of meditation? So, example is this:
Okay.
I'm living this lifetime, right?
Correct.
And maybe I had another father from another past life, and another mom, and another
Correct.
sister and brother,
Correct.
but I don't know who they are. So.
Correct.
You're saying, in essence, maybe that if I went into this deep meditation, that I would know? Is that possible? And will you know your father in another lifetime?
Okay, so I'm going to try to give you a little bit of history and some of the science of it that fascinated me when I started doing the research on it. The first thing is, during meditation, during the time between wake and sleep, which is when many people report past life memories, and during past life regression hypnosis, the brain actually has increase in alpha and theta waves, and alpha and theta waves increase when you are remembering. So that's an interesting fact. So those three states all have increase in alpha theta waves, and people remember. And then there's the other thing that occurs, because most of these memories are drawn from your subconscious. So I got to kind of give you a little scenario. The first time you burn yourself, it's hot and you pull back. The second time you burn yourself, you pull back faster, because in your subconscious, you remember this. When scientists try to put this into a neuropathological plan, they actually come up with what's called the modular system in the brain, where the brain actually locates everything as either a positive or negative experience and loads it someplace that most of us experience as our subconscious. So here's an example. If you meet someone and they were a positive experience, your subconscious may pull up that this was a positive experience, and you'll feel like you have already known them. It's that person you meet on the street, or somebody you sort of just knew, and then when you finally got a chance to sit down and talk, you suddenly talk for 3.5 hours, sharing everything you knew. Mm-hmm. That's someone you knew in your past, and you're comfortable. Or you may sit down with them, and within moments, you're uncomfortable. And you don't want to be around, and you don't think, I don't ever want to be their friend. And you wonder why it's so uncomfortable, because somewhere in the past you had a very negative experience and it's shared.
Yes.
If I go from the example that I had of being shot by a gangster in an alley in Chicago in 1925, my subconscious is going to tell me, avoid dark alleys at night. It's dangerous. Right. So there are some things about past lives that can be protective. There are also some things about past lives that can be a form of neurosis in this life. And some people who do past life regression hypnosis will find people who have a past life memory where they died swimming and now they're still afraid of the water. Mm-hmm. And so finding those and approaching them during hypnosis allows the person to get over it and swim in this life. Because if you swim in a nice, safe swimming pool with a life jacket on, you're not going to drown.
Yeah. No, I've heard of that. I've heard of that. I believe
There's
that.
so many people that are terrified.
Yeah, terrified. Well, I
water
don't like heights.
for no reason.
Yes.
Maybe I fell out of a plane.
Maybe I pushed you.
Hey, seriously.
Absolutely.
We're talking about these past lives that you've had. And again, like I said, I do believe it. Was it all on planet Earth, or are there other Earths similar to ours where these lives could have taken place?
All right. So if we're going to go down that one, I'm going to tell you that every one of my past lives was on Earth. I have some memories of the time between lives. And I'm going to, because I think it's interesting for your listeners, everybody, first, let's go back up. First of all, they've been doing studies on children for 50 or 60 years. They have about 2,500 kids where they've verified their past lives. Some of them are famous. A guy who was a fighter pilot in World War II went down off the coast of Japan. There was a kid who remembered going down, remembered the name of the boat, remembered some of the people on the boat. He reported it to his parents. His parents called Ian Stevenson at the time, who went out. They did some investigation. They found the boat name. They found that he was the only man who was shot down and went down on the coast of Japan. And they found everybody that he named on the roster of the boat. And this kid was 3 years old. You can't coach a 3-year-old kid, those kind of things. So they have these people who have children who have spontaneous lives. Then we start to look at things like past life memories, near-death experiences, what these kids say who have had spontaneous memories of the time between lives. And what almost all of them report is that when they were on the other side, there's an overwhelming sense of love, compassion, comfort, without needs, that they meet their loved ones who have passed, that there are light beings or spiritual beings of some kind that assist them in their planning of their life, and that they go through a past life review, and all of those match the memories that I have at the time between lives. So I think all of those things tie into an experience that's somewhat related. If you start reading about people who have other experiences, such as astral projection, they seem to be able to report something that is not physically present where they're present. I think some people that have alien abduction experiences, because most of them report that they have some sort of physical symptoms, but nobody sees them abducted, that those are all out-of-body spiritual experiences, that they're not actually abducted by a physical alien. And there's a couple other things that are important here. We don't know if there's any life anywhere else. We do know that people who report being abducted frequently report the abductors as being strange, sort of humanoid in shape frequently. The pictures always have no eyes, no anything. It's because if you're having a spiritual out-of-body experience and it's not with an alien, it's probably with another spiritual being, a ghost, etc. None of your senses are normal on that side. Everything is telepathic. And so you don't really see, feel, hear, touch. You experience pictures. And you can only experience what you know. And so every alien appears somewhat humanoid. Why that is so strange is in science, they have determined what's called the alpha constant. It's at approximately 1/137. It's all the fine-tuning that occurs on planet Earth that makes the oxygen percentage, the carbon percentage, the water percentage, the percentage of amino acids in a protein all reach the same here. And when they measure the alpha constant, as you go in one direction in the universe, it gets smaller. And if you measure the alpha constant, if you go the other direction in the universe, it gets larger. So even if there is an alien life somewhere away from Earth, it in no way looks human. It in no way is related to the same water, oxygen, nitrogen content that we have here. So it's a different kind of creature.
Yep.
And this may sound strange, but Isabella says reincarnation is very species specific. So if you're placed in a human, you should be human because your soul or consciousness knows how to interact with this kind of brain. And other brains do not interact the same way.
Okay.
Now, I know people who say they have had past life memories as being aliens. Most of the time they report incredible crystalloid type experiences, strange lights, lots of bright lights, shining lights, globes, and etc. And that's the same spiritual experience I have that the spiritual world or heaven looks like.
Okay. So I have a question. What lessons have you both learned during this whole process?
Okay. So the first one, I'm going to say we're going to jump back into the little religious thing a little bit. We're given free will because without free will, you can't love, because love that is coerced or forced is not love. So it would be impossible to love a deity if you did not have free will.
Okay.
And so you can also not love and fear at the same time. And some of the Bible stories are pretty scary. The other thing is, if you're given chance after chance to get it right, Christians will hate me when I say this, but I was raised Catholic. Jesus is certainly a historical figure. Certainly, I have no doubt that he's a person in history. However, no one is responsible for your actions except for you.
That's true.
And the atoning death of someone else will not take away your sins.
I believe that's true. I definitely agree with that.
So, from a spiritual side, Jesus is an incredible human who preached love, kindness, acceptance, allowance to the table, bringing all to your same table. That's what I believe Jesus represents and that we can all appreciate. I think Paul, who was having some other out-of-body spiritual experience since he never met Jesus, wrote most of the Christian doctrine from then on. So when people say, the Bible says you can't talk to dead people, well, Paul talked to dead people. So there's some part of the story missing here.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Hey, I got it. As time is going quick, I have a couple of questions I want to get in there. Do you remember your name in past lives?
Good question.
Do I ever get a name in my past lives?
No, do you remember? Were you a John? Were you an Anthony? Were you a Tony? Were you a Fred?
So,
do you know the names?
Yes, I know the names of all 42 of my past lives.
Wow.
What was some of them?
Okay. I got to tell you this story because I think it's really excellent. Our very first life 6,000 years ago, my name was David and Carla's name was Ariella.
Oh.
We were born just outside or close to the Mount of Olives. Went back, did the research. There was a civilization there about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago where they found the remains. Also did and looked back at old biblical Hebrew. And of course, David is still translated as David. And what we found is Ariella translates into Italian as Carlos. which is Carla, which is very interesting. I've been David 4 times. I've been John 2 or 3 times. I have been a Robert twice, and also Rodebert, which is an Old English form of Robert that we found. I have had the name Gregorius and actually lived on the island of Lesbos off of Greece, about 600 BC. So multiple times Carla and I have found each other. Now, I was also Samuel, and her name was Julia in Chicago, not in Chicago, in South Dakota Territory. And I do have another Samuel life, and she has a Julia life 3 other times.
Wow.
Okay.
So I think it's interesting.
That is interesting. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Can you've had all these past lives. Today, can you go to any of your grave sites and say that was me?
Wow.
Okay. So the answer to that is yes. I've gone to 2 of them.
Really?
Yes.
How did you feel? Like, what were the feelings that you had?
So, again, I have to give you 2 little parts. So soon after I met Carla's mother, I had a funeral of a friend, and I went, and I didn't feel anything at the funeral. And I thought for sure I was going to feel something. I went to England and found myself from the 1400s and found the tomb and didn't feel anything.
Okay.
However, I went into a museum while I was in England, and I was standing in front of the bust of Ramesses II, and I had an experience while I was standing there, and I remembered chiseling the bust.
Mm-hmm.
And that entire life unfolded while I stood in a museum, and my sister and brother-in-law came up and said, Dave, you've stood there for 35 minutes with your eyes closed.
Wow.
And I tried to explain it to them, and my sister, who is still incredibly Catholic, has read all our books, usually looks at me and says, I think it's all very interesting, Dave, but she doesn't want to quite go down this path yet.
Yep, that's kind of like what our family says too.
Well, it's hard. It's hard for some people
yeah.
to grasp. We're believers, of course, but it is hard for some people. Hey, another question. I got to jump this one in is because, who were you the life before this one? What was your name?
My name was Johnny.
I'm sorry?
Johnny.
Okay, Johnny. Well, you were Johnny before this life. Okay.
Right.
Now, if people go to visit Johnny at the grave or wherever Johnny is, but Johnny's reborn, how can they communicate with you at all? Because if I go to a gravesite to my grandmother and I pray to her from this reincarnation that we believe in, then is she not getting my prayers? Because we can't pick and choose who we believe is reincarnated and who is not reincarnated.
Correct. And that's the time between life.
We can't be narrow-minded. So then if you're reincarnated and your friend is reincarnated, then we're all reincarnated. There's no special you get 29 times and you get 50 times. So then if I go to a cemetery and pray to my grandmother or someone that I know, is it useless or is it better going to a form of meditation?
So let me tell you this. From my experiences, and I'm going to tell you that I watched my father's last past life review. I had that privilege. So my father is not coming back. So that's one point. There are those people who get done and don't have to return. The next issue is the time between lives can be very variable. Now, it is actually getting shorter as the population gets bigger. when they study what people remember. But because you return with some of the same groups over and over again, you will probably be able to pray and reach your mother, because she probably will not reincarnate for a period of time, so that if she's going to be in your life again, she'll be there. So there are going to be people that you can reach in the spiritual world. Now, I'm going to tell you, the spirit guides tell me that they won't always allow you to reach everyone in the spiritual world, because depending on their attitude, and I know that sounds strange, but some people who have to come back don't like it, because they know part of what's going to happen, even though they forget when they get here. And so they wish to reach out and influence the world they're going to return to. And we're not supposed to know what the world that we're returning to, because then we don't react the way we're supposed to. We react in a way to change our path. And we have to respond appropriately. So we can't know the future.
I just want to, I want to give a shout out to everybody in chat. Junior, I think that's Caller in here. Carla is in chat. Lena. So yes, we know all of our homes. So that is Carla. So she is participating in chat. Thank you, Carla, for that. I'm sorry that you could not make it today, but you're here in chat. So that's great.
We're at the end of the show.
Yes.
It was a great show, a lot of knowledge. To the listener, please share it. I got some of my good questions in there, things I want to know.
Thank you so much.
Where can people find you and Carla? And what do you have going on really quick, because we have about a minute and a half.
Okay. People can reach us at our website, which is thegiftofpastlives.com. Certainly links to our books, The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth, Hell No Reincarnation, which is sort of how we reconciled with our Catholic upbringing, and the manual, which talks about how life is planned for the next life. And on that website, we also have email. Contact us, and it will email directly, and we respond to all those emails. So if people have additional questions, we'll contact. We're certainly available to speak at any type of engagement if people are interested. We have past life regression training, but we usually don't do regression training except on people that we know close to us.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on Horsefly Chronicles Radio.
Yes.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. This has been a great show.
Carla, this is talking to both of you.
Thank you.
Special thank you to Carnation for fully sponsoring the show. We love them. Thank you so much. Join us next Monday night at United Public Radio Network on 105.3 FM from New Orleans. And we are going to pop on The Missing Piece. So you get another hour of us.
Oh, wow. Everyone have a safe, great night, and we'll see you
next Monday.
Or in a couple minutes.